Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you, a little bit out of sequence with Tag Tuesday, and in a new location that I'm hoping to make something of. We are, I'd say, here in Boston, no more than a month away from Windows Open weather, from it no longer being prohibitively cold in many places of Hyde Cottage, and that I'm thinking I will commemorate that with changing things around a bit. Including a couple of new filming locations, which would be a lot of fun. This filming location is not me perched on a chair, so it's a lot more relaxing, which is very nice. I have a tag. The reason it's out of sequence is because I just saw it. I saw it on Roz's channel, Scaly Dandelion, the Scaly Dandelion about the books. It was done by Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics, and it's a sort of COVID-19 update tag. It's the Covid Katchup Tag, and I love that. I love that idea. I wasn't tagged by Alan, I don't think, and I wasn't tagged by Roz, but Roz at least said that everybody should feel free to do this, and I want to, and I want to second that. I want everybody else to do this as well. It's basically just a short barrage of questions about how are you dealing? How are you dealing with COVID-19? How are you dealing with this thing that unites us all? Not many things do, but this thing unites us all. We have all had to deal with this in the last year. Roz points out in her video, I'll leave a link to her video and Alan's original video down below. Roz points out that it's been a year. We are all experiencing, at one point or another in March, we are all experiencing the 1-year anniversary of some of the first official responses to this thing. That's true in America. It's true in the UK. It's true in a lot of places. And I wanted to answer these questions. So I asked Roz if I could consider myself tagged. I'm just going to consider myself tagged, and we'll see how it goes. The first question is, when did you first hear about COVID-19? And I first heard about it in January of 2020, when it didn't really have the name COVID-19, wasn't really going by that name, at least in common parlance. I saw pictures of fully dressed adults face down in shopping centers in China, obviously unconscious, maybe even dead. And the pictures were grainy. They were obviously taken clandestinely from long distance telegraph, from zooming in with your cell phone. And around that time, I started to hear rumors that Chinese scientists who were calling this thing a big deal, a new novel coronavirus strain, and stories, garbled stories coming out of China that these scientists were being forced to recant, one in particular being forced to recant, and dying of COVID-19 anyway. Those were my first exposures. It was looking at those stories, fragmentary stories in January of 2020, and thinking, this could be serious. This could be something. My first reaction was, the Chinese government would not react this way if they themselves weren't aware that this was serious. I'm not the first person to see the parallel with the way the Soviet Union reacted to the Chernobyl disaster, and I won't be the last person, but it did strike that chord where, okay, your own reactions are alarming me about something that you clearly don't want to alarm the world about, or even inform the world about. And I don't know what will happen. Those will be some of the most intensely studied months in human history. I imagine we will have history after history after history being written about what was done, what was known, where it comes from, all that sort of stuff. But I remember one of my first memories are those still photographs of people face down on the ground, where I looked at them and thought, okay, that is really serious. That isn't what you see in a seasonal flu. And then shortly after that, I started paying attention to some YouTube channels, including one called Peak Prosperity, that started to be issuing warnings about this. The the main spokesperson for Peak Prosperity started talking about this as being really serious. Started to have a checklist of points that he wanted to hammer home with every video, and that checklist got longer and longer the more he learned about this disease. And it wasn't easy to get information in those early months. And the one point that he kept hammering home over and over again is that this is not just the flu. This is not the flu. This is 5 times more deadly and 5 times more communicable than the flu. It's a different category, and we shouldn't be talking about it that way. And I found those videos fascinating. I don't know if they're still up. I have no idea what YouTube's policies are for COVID-19 videos. I'll have to look and see if I can find one of those early videos. Some of the first ones that I remember seeing. I'll try and remember to leave a link to it down below. But it was in January. It was early on in January. I started mentioning it on this channel shortly after that. And several of you have pointed out that a year before that on this channel, I made a video, just a fun tag about, I think it was a tag video about future catastrophes. Maybe it wasn't even a tag video. I don't know which video it was. If one of you does, feel free to let me know in the comments. But I made a video where I mentioned that humanity just in general is not in any way prepared for an aerobically transmitted virus that causes lots of problems. That's not just another outbreak of seasonal flu, but something much more than that, that humanity is not ready for that at all. But I think the answer to the question, for me, it would be January of 2020. Question number 2 is, how are things in your neck of the woods? What's open, what's not? A perfectly Alan question. I have no idea if Alan watches my channel. I watch his. I'll leave a link to his original video down below. But this is exactly the question that I want to ask all of you. I am nosy anyway, but I want to know the answer to this question: how you're all doing? What is the state of things where you are? Here in Boston, Massachusetts was one of the earliest states in the Union that was hit, and we were hit early, and we were hit really hard. Of course, in the meantime, in the ensuing year, everyone's been hit really hard, almost. So the numbers for new cases and deaths in Massachusetts from last March that looked so apocalyptic, we are now, and by we I mean America, we are now living with those numbers all the time. That seemed like a spike. It was a spike then, but that spike has been superseded. But here in Massachusetts, the state of things is extremely livable. I hate to say that in this circumstance. I know some places are much worse off. Our numbers are still frightening, but all shops are open. Most government agencies are open for one capacity or another. My daily life is not all that much affected. There are some businesses that aren't open, that just shuttered last March and have stayed that way. But for instance, most retail shops, comic shops, bookstores, the big Barnes & Noble bookstore here in Boston, the big chain bookstore, thousands of square feet, every new release, all the magazines. That big Barnes & Noble in the Prudential Center, I don't think ever closed. I don't think they were ever ordered to close, and I don't think they ever did. They just decreased maximum capacity, and the staff was reduced to a bare minimum and told that one of your duties now on the staff is to be wiping things down, wipe and clean things regularly. I think they've stayed open the whole time. Quite a few other businesses have stayed open the whole time. There are movie theaters that are open that you can go to. And all of the local stuff here in my specific neighborhood is all open and has been open. Not willy-nilly. No, like for instance, the restaurants, the little shops here, the little cafes here, you can't go in and sit down for a meal. But you can do takeaway for everything. And all of the convenience stores, the little bodegas, the bigger convenience stores, the markets, the little neighborhood markets that are even bigger than a convenience store, all of those have stayed open throughout and are still open. So you definitely know that there's a strain. You can definitely tell For instance, that there are strains downstream because there's a road right here and there's no traffic. I mean, there's traffic, but there's hardly any traffic. In pre-pandemic days, in 2019, there were long stretches of time where you could not cross that road anywhere. Even at a crossroad, even at a crosswalk, you had to dutifully wait for the light to turn and for the traffic to come to a stop on all four lanes. Whereas now you can walk across that road at almost any time of the day or night with waiting a minute or two, because the traffic doesn't have anywhere to go, because so many businesses, so many corporations in the main center of Boston shuttered last March and have not opened again, and I don't know ever will. I've said this on this channel a few times. I think about those gigantic corporate skyscrapers that are all over Manhattan that closed up shop in last March, a year ago, and have learned in the meantime that telework, Zoom conferences, that sort of thing work just fine, and offload a lot of the expenses to the workers. The corporations, I can't help but believe, if you are a 30,000 employee corporation who had one of the 3 floors of one of those business towers in Manhattan, I can't help but believe that when your lease comes due right now, you're not going to renew it. Why on earth would you? Your staff hasn't gone into that building in a year. You've been paying an exorbitant Manhattan rent that whole time. Why would you do that? And what is true for 3 floors of a building in downtown Manhattan is certainly true of all of these corporate business parks, is what they are called here in America. I don't know, in your country you might have something similar, where the big highways leading into and out of the big cities have these massive corporate campuses for one corporation after another for dozens and dozens of miles outside of those cities. So they were benefited. The benefit of that arrangement was that you had proximity to the big city that was the hub of what you were doing, but you weren't in them. You could have a big business that was directly outside of that city, and you could have a landscaped park with the big building and a sheltered parking garage and whatnot. And again, why would any corporation that's paying through the nose, rent or mortgage through the nose for that environment, why would they go back? They know they don't need to, so why would they? We'll see. There are many, many long-term tectonic shifts that are going to happen as a result of this, I think, and that will be one of them. So those businesses in Boston, no idea what's going to happen there. I know that a lot of them would like, a lot of the businesses that I'm thinking about are not in the service economy, but quite a few of them are, and I don't know what the shape of that is going to be like this summer. But right now, in terms of what's open and what's not, pretty much everything that I would need is open. The one huge exception are the newsrooms that I had entree to in 2018, 2017, 2019. A lot of those newsrooms aren't open and haven't been open and may not be open. So who knows? Question number 3 is beach reading. Any books you are looking forward to reading after COVID? I love the question for its optimism. I myself increasingly don't believe there is going to be an after COVID. But I understand the sense of the question. And for me, I don't have the titles or authors of the books because I don't know what they are. For me, the thing that I missed the most, I made a sort of a personal decision in late 2019. Typical rotten timing. I made a personal decision in late 2019 to make better use of my libraries, to get back into the habit of loving and using my libraries. Not for ebooks over Overdrive, but in person. I belong to 2 libraries in Boston. One is a private lending library, and one is the Boston Public Library, the gorgeous, ornate, beautiful, wonderful Boston Public Library. And I sort of made a mental decision that in 2020 I would rectify what had been a great deal of neglect for those libraries. I get new books in the mail all the time. My business is with new books. My job, my passion is reading and reviewing new books in the American market, and that tended to draw me away from the Boston Public Library, because the new release section of a library, even a really good library, is going to strike me as really, really weak. the new release section of the Boston Public Library is going to have tons and tons of books that I read months and months ago that I've already reviewed. So it's a new release to the general public, but not to someone who's a book reviewer. But even then, I noticed that when I would look at the new release section of the Boston Public Library, I would often find books that I missed, that I just plain missed, which happens, of course. No matter how assiduous you are, it happens. And those are one of the books that I would like to read after COVID. But another one very much that I would like to, I don't know that it's ever going to come back. I don't know that I'm ever going to have it again. And that is the random discoveries in the stacks of the Boston Public Library, where I would go up into the shelves and I would just wander around, pulling one book off after another. Sometimes, years ago, I would do that until I had an armload of books. I would bring them over to the nearest big cedar block table and just sit and explore. I might not do that after COVID. I might not do that in 2021, but I would bring those books home. But I would only find them through serendipity. I would only find them through just looking. And that I very much would like to do. It kills me that I made that decision to reappreciate the Boston Public Library too late. Because I don't think you're allowed to wander around inside the library. I think you can do pickups. But I don't think you're allowed to just wander around. I'm pretty sure I haven't been inside the Boston Public Library in a year. The longest I've ever gone when I wasn't traveling outside the country without doing that. But I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to just sit at the tables inside. I'm pretty sure the cafes on the inside are closed, and that you can call for a book to be set aside so you can go in and pick it up. But I'm pretty sure you can't just go in and browse. I should check and see the next time I'm in the neighborhood. Maybe it's possible for me to reappreciate the Boston Public Library in some way or other, even if it's not the full way that I had in mind. Question number 4 is, what's a book you have read in these last months directly or indirectly because of COVID? For me, it will be COVID books. For instance, 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World by Fareed Zakaria. I read and reviewed that book. It was one of the first ones out of the gate that I ever saw that dealt specifically with COVID-19. But I've also recently just read The Premonition by Michael Lewis, the author of Moneyball and The Big Short and whatnot. And he has a new book, I think it comes out in May. His new book is about COVID-19. It's about the people who first noticed it, the people who first wanted to sound the alarm about it, the people who first wanted to study it, and the resistance that they met. And he's a big name in best-selling nonfiction, so I imagine it's going to get a lot of attention, and from reviewers, in America when it comes out in the spring. And I can't help but wonder if a lot of those reviewers won't ask a lot of the same questions that are in this tag. They'll ask, all right, we're at a year or more. It's time to start taking stock of what this is, what this experience is. When did we all first start to have our lives changed by this thing? When did we first start to realize that it existed? When did we first start to realize that it was serious? And where did we get that information from? Was it people like the people in Lewis's book? So, books like that are the books that I have had to read because of COVID, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There will be an avalanche of books in 2022, 2023. There's going to be an avalanche of books about 2 subjects. One will be scholarly and non-scholarly books about COVID-19, its origins, to the extent that we know that, and also the incredible just tsunami of effects, the way it has affected world societies, world governments. It's a thing that none of us has ever seen, and there's going to be a tsunami of books about it. That will be one of the subjects. I will be incredibly interested to read all of those books. The other tsunami of books that I imagine is coming will be a lot less palatable to read, and that will be the armed insurrection that tried to overthrow my government, to try to overthrow the capital of my country. I imagine there'll be a large number of books about that, and I'm going to have to read all of those as well. But the COVID books will be, I hope, more comprehensive and more interesting. But the Fareed Zakaria's book I read, there have been others. Lawrence Wright, of course, had a novel that he wrote about a worldwide pandemic. He wrote the novel before the pandemic happened. So, but Michael Lewis's book, I think a lot of people will ignore Fareed Zakaria's book, or they'll overlook it, So I think his book will be, a lot of reviewers will probably open their piece with saying that we could expect that we're going to get lots of books like this. Uh, Question number 5 is, what is the best video you have made or seen during COVID? And in terms of smile inducing, I would echo Roz here in her version of this tag. She mentions some of Sean the Bookmaniac's Zoom chats with other people. I wish that I could do a Zoom chat on Sean's channel. That would be so much fun. But he has done Zoom chats with people that he can't meet or couldn't meet anyway. Like Roz mentions, we are all, because of this pandemic, we've all become, we've had to learn Zoom and its ways. I've done some Zoom chats of my own. A lot of those have been fun as well. I would nominate those for some of the favorite videos that I've made. And another video that I've watched was far more disturbing to watch. It was by the leftist British author and commentator Owen Jones, who did a really good video on his country's history with COVID-19. I'll have to find it and leave a link to it down below. It's really worth watching. It's sort of a mini documentary, but it's done with scathing anger, and really, I thought, well done. And there have been many others too, but even I would say some of those early diagnostic videos on peak prosperity, I think a lot of those were really well done. Really struck a good tone, as opposed to, pie in the sky or propaganda or anything like that. The videos that I wish I hadn't seen. Oh man. Well, the question doesn't ask for those. So, question number 6 is: are you going to have the vaccine? And yes, I am. Of course, I am. Massachusetts has a Republican state governor, and his response at the beginning was not the typical Republican response. He decided to be sane. He decided to listen to experts, decided to pay attention to virologists. But Massachusetts, our rollout of the vaccines has not been very good. In fact, at one point we were ranked 49th out of 50 states. I don't know if that's still true. Right now, it seems to me like the government of Boston is telling me you are perfect. You are in an approved group to get your vaccine, and you should go right ahead and do that. Oh, and I hope you don't mind, but you're going to have to wait in an enclosed space for 40 minutes with a whole bunch of other sick people. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I've been starting to aggressively ask around people that I know in the medical profession, find out what are the options here for getting the vaccine. And there's also a question of trying to figure out which vaccine I want. I don't know if I'll be given a choice, but there are a number of vaccines that are out there. A handful of them follow the standard model for vaccines, which is to use the virus itself as part of the vaccine. And there are a number that don't do that. And I think I'd rather have the ones that don't. I'd rather not have this virus injected into my body at all, even in a controlled format. So I don't know. I am definitely going to get vaccinated. I'm not one. I don't know. Just don't know when it will happen, and I'm not 100% sure what long-term overall effect it will have either. I'll have a card that says that I was vaccinated. I imagine that card will make it possible for me to travel a little bit more, maybe to Vermont. I imagine that card will be required at some enclosed indoor events, but I don't know the long-term details of that, and I don't know how that would work. How are you going to know without that card that anyone around you who's not wearing a mask all of a sudden is vaccinated? How are you going to know that the card is legitimate? And also, how much is the card going to be worth? How are we going to know how long the vaccine confers immunity? Or whether or not it even does confer immunity against, maybe some new strand that appears. I don't know how it's going to work. I am all in favor of, an immunological response. Absolutely. A vaccine, whatever is available that seems reliable, it'd be fine by me. And of course, the question doesn't ask it, but I'm asking all of these questions of you as well. What is your own vaccine status? And that is it. That is the COVID Katchup Tag. I just wanted to do it mainly because I wanted to give you a sort of a status report on where I am, and also to ask you to do this tag if you have a BookTube channel, or if not, feel free to email me and tell me how you're doing with these questions. My overall response to COVID a year ago was just, well, at first I was playful about it. First I thought it would be just a serious virus. I didn't have any idea at the beginning, even a year ago, I didn't have any idea how bad it would be. But the horror that I felt wasn't so much for the virus. It was as I slowly realized that unbelievably, just utterly unbelievably, I still don't believe that it happened, that it's happening still, that unbelievably, a sitting president of the United States was going to politicize a virus. It seemed to me, when I started to see that happening, to be as inconceivable as a sitting president politicizing a sunrise. And yet that is what the Donald Trump administration did. It politicized the virus. And that is still true. In Republican strongholds, you are subject to mockery or physical abuse if you wear a mask. In huge swaths of the United States, it is a sign that you are, in fact, a Republican, that you don't wear a mask. And all of it is out of loyalty to one man, to one racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron, Donald Trump, who lost the Republican Party, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House, and yet is still an object of cult-like devotion. Literally cult-like, in the sense that cults often require you to put your own physical health on the bargaining table. Cults often ask you to do that as a sign of loyalty. And that is absolutely true. Show me a Republican wedding that has anybody with a mask on. Show me a Republican get-together at a bowling alley or a steak joint or wherever, where anybody's wearing a mask. Show me Republican political gatherings, CPAC or anywhere else, where there's a mask anywhere in sight. It has become a sign that you are a Republican in this country, that you don't wear a mask. And if you wear a mask, then it has become a common accepted thing throughout a huge swath of this country that if you're wearing a mask, it means you're a Democrat. I never saw that coming, and I was appalled when I thought, even this administration can't possibly be that reckless to politicize this thing, and they did. I can't help but believe that that is the reason why America has had such a crappy response to this, because it has broken down along tribal lines. Instead of what I thought the response would be a little patchy, because I thought the response would break down along economic lines. So huge numbers of areas, for instance, in rural Kentucky or West Virginia or something, would have less access to supplies, equipment, masks, ventilators, eventually vaccines or whatever. I thought it would break down. I thought the map would show the wealth inequality in the United States, which is rampant and which is the disgrace of the whole world. I had no idea at first, when I'd first heard about this thing, I had no idea that any presidential administration would be depraved enough to make this a culture war thing, and this one did. And that has been disastrous. It's only now that we're starting to roll out vaccines in massive numbers. It's only now that slowly, even those enclaves are starting to think, okay, well, this is what they should have thought a year ago, which is, this is just a biological thing. This is just a virus. It isn't anything political at all. It doesn't have anything to do with that at all. Not everything does. So if you're in America, I'm especially curious to know how you're doing with this thing. Have you had it, for instance? And if so, was it really bad? I've watched as many YouTubers all across the spectrum, all kinds of YouTube channels on all kinds of subjects, have either had a loved one that got it or have got it themselves. And famously, of course, the news talking head, Chris Cuomo, was first reporting on the coronavirus and then got it and had to quarantine at home and was able to report on all of that firsthand, what it's like. So I'd love to hear your stories. That's one of the main reasons that I did this tag without being tagged by anybody. I also wanted to see on pragmatic terms whether or not this would be easier to do when I'm feeling crappy. and it was. So God help you. I don't know if I'm going to upload this today, though. I might wait for official permission from either Alan or Roz. I don't know. I don't know if Alan watches this channel. I don't know if he likes me at all. But I'd love to know that I can do this tag without rumpling any feathers. But one way or another, I'm gonna wrap this up. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.